Alright, in this video we're going to cover images. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so to this point we've done some basic HTML stuff, we've put in some elements, we've played around with some text, we've played around with some links, and now we are going to start learning a little bit about images. Now in this video we're going to go over some of the basics, and later on we're actually going to use CSS and do some real serious manipulation with images. But for right now, I just want to introduce you to some of the basic concepts. Now, images are an integral part of using HTML and web browsing in general. Back in the bad old days, the late 80s, early 90s, you really couldn't do a whole lot with images on the internet. Everything was pretty much text-based, and you know, developers and all that kind of thought, well, hey, maybe we should use this new documenting software to share images as well. And so they wrote some code, and now we can see images, and it's kind of become a way of life. If you go onto pretty much any modern web page, it's formatted not only with text but also with images that highlight some of the design. I mean, e-commerce, for example, going to Amazon, they have images of pretty much all of their products. So, very important. Alright, so here's how you do an image, how you define an image. Here's the easiest way. Well, first you have to either have an image that you've downloaded and sitting in a folder and you're going to display it, or display an image that resides somewhere on the internet. Here's the basic setup. It all starts with the image tag, or IMG. And then you have what's called a source attribute, or source, SRC, and then an equal sign, an open quote, the URL for the image, or basically where is the image? Okay, you tell me, what image am I using? What am I going to display? So in this case, I would have, excuse me, a image.jpg, for example, if I'm going to display some image there. And then we usually always put in alt, which is another attribute, and that stands for alternative text. So in this case, it would just be sample image. Okay, whatever the description of that image is. If somebody can't see the image, it basically gives them text that says this is the sample image. Okay, or whatever the description is. And then images are what are called self-closing. So at the very end, you actually just close out the image tag. It's all in one tag. There's no opening and closing tag. It's just the image tag. Okay, so that's your basic syntax. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this code and save it as a different file. I'm going to go ahead and save this one as I'm going to create a new folder called images, and then I'm going to save my page as image sample 1. Make sure to save it as HTML, otherwise you won't be able to render the file. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. Now, one of the things that I'm going to see when I run this page is that it's actually not going to display an image yet, because this image doesn't actually exist. So what you'll get is some alt text. If I inspect this element or hover over it, it'll tell me that this is a sample image. Depends on the browser, but you'll see that that image doesn't exist. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to display an image that I know does exist, because I've downloaded some images from the internet to this folder that I've created called images. Now, this might sound a little confusing at first, but I'm going to create a folder inside of the images folder called images, and then I'm going to take the two images that I downloaded and I'm going to move them into that images folder. That's standard practice when you're on the internet or developing web pages, if you have images, to stick them into a folder that is self-explanatory, like images, for example. Okay. It's good practice. So, my first image that I have is called Glacier Park 1, I believe. Yep. And it's just a picture of Glacier National Park. It's one of my favorite places to visit. And for my alternative text, I'm going to say Glacier National Park, mountains with rainbows or something. It's a really cool picture that some lucky, very lucky person took. Alright, so this image should be displayed. This is Glacier Park 1. And let's go ahead and look at it here. Oops. I need to remember to put in the folder that I want to go to. In this case, it's images, because when I look at my main folder here, I have my file that I'm rendering, and then there's an images folder. In the same folder here, there's an images subfolder, and in that subfolder, there's a file called glacierpark1.jpg. Okay. So now, when I go and I save this file and render it, should pop open, and it's full size, which I'll show you how to manipulate that to display a smaller setting here in a second. Alright, so that's my first image, just this absolutely breathtaking picture of Glacier Park with a rainbow in the shot. Like I said, very jealous. That was very just beautiful, beautiful picture. But it's huge, so we might have to resize that here in a moment. Scale it down, if you will. Alright, so that is probably the simplest way to create an image. Again, you want to go with your image source, and there's a folder inside that images folder called images. Unfortunately, it's got a bad name, but that's best practices here. And then the name of this file is called glacierpark1.jpg. Now, one of the things you want to make sure when you're doing images is that the file name for the file that you're displaying, the image, matches exactly. For example, if I did something like .jpg all in uppercase, it may not render. It depends on the web browser. In this case, it did, but you want to make sure that everything is case sensitive. In other words, if the file's name is glacierpark1.jpg, just like it's shown here, you have to type it in that way. If not, it may not work and won't be able to render the image properly. One of the ways to check that, to see exactly what the file name is, if you're in Windows, is to right click on the file, go to Properties, then go to Details, and you'll see what the file name is. It's down here at the bottom. In this case, it's you just want to make sure that it matches what it says here with what you're typing in your code. Otherwise, it may not render. Okay. Now, so we've gone over basic images. We've gone over the alt attribute. With the alt attribute, you just want to make sure that it indeed gives a good description of what the image is, just in case the image can't pull up, or if somebody is visually impaired and they can't see the image. They're using a special program that reads the code back. This will tell them what they're supposed to be looking at. Now, one of the things that I want to show you real quick is to set a height and width of an image. Now, there are programs out on the internet that, like the GIMP or Paint.net, or a whole bunch of them, that will actually allow you to change the image itself to resize it. Picasa from Google's another good one. Here in a week or two, we'll start getting into some of that stuff. But one of the ways that you can actually set an image size is to use a couple of attributes called width and height. Now, one of the things that I can do is this, and again, there are other ways to do all this stuff, and we're going to learn more advanced ways to do image manipulation later. But I can check and see by looking at the dimensions of these images, and then I can kind of scale it down a little bit. Now, I purposely picked an image that was 1024 by 768 because it's real easy to figure out how to scale that down a little bit. Now, one of the things that I can do is I can set my my height to, I don't know, 640. And so anyways, the name of the attribute is called height. And what I can do too when I've got a tag here that's getting pretty long is I can just hit enter and go down to the next line. You can do that in HTML. You'll do that a lot. So my height is would be 480 pixels, and my width would be 640 pixels. Okay, I'm just scaling it down. This down to what they call VGA. It's just certain resolution. It's pretty small. So let's go ahead and look what we've got here. And what this did basically is it just made the file a little bit smaller. If I wanted to, I could set this even lower. Now another thing you can do too is you can set your height and your width to be something like, I don't know, 25%, and that'll work too. Either way, doesn't matter too much. It all depends on the browser too, if it can handle it. But see how now this file, even though it's the same size, it's displaying it at 25% of its original value, which was, pretty good size picture. All right. So that's kind of the basic on just displaying an image. Now, one of the things that you can do when you're looking at images is you can set up an image to be a link to a certain web page. One of the things that I can do real quick is I can pull down, and I showed you this in a previous video, but I'll show it again just because it's something you're going to be doing a lot. Now, when I looked at, when I created the video for links, I pulled down in Google's logo. Okay, and what I'm going to do is show you how to use Google's logo to link to Google real quick. So I'm just going to set up an H4 size heading, and I'm going to say link to Google. Another thing I'm going to do real quick is go up at the top here, and I'm going to type another H4 size heading and just say sample picture of Glacier. If you've never been to Glacier National Park, it is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful and just fantastic. You'll never experience anything like it in your life. I highly recommend it. Okay, so to set up a link, a picture that when you click on it goes to a web page or any other document, anything, this is how you do it. First thing that you do is you type in your link. So in this case, I'm just going to build a link that goes out to Google. Okay. And then I'm going to use my image here, and I'm going to say that my image source is images, and I need to go check and see what the name of that logo 3w.png. And the alt, I'll just say Google logo. Okay. And close out the link, close out the image tag, close out the link, and save the file. Let's go ahead and run it real quick. Oop, where am I at? There I am. Alright, so if I click this picture of Google's logo, it should take me to Google's webpage. And it does. Now, here's one other thing I want to show you real quick. And this is actually the last, this is the last thing for links that for images that I want to show you, is to excuse me, create a link, or I'm sorry, an image that when you click on the image goes to a full size image. Now there are a couple ways you can do this. Now I'm going to take a program real quick called the GIMP, and I'm going to open up that giant picture of Glacier National Park, and I'm going to create a smaller version of it called a thumbnail. Now you don't have to do this just yet this week with image manipulation program. We're actually going to do it later on, and probably use the GIMP. Maybe I'll I'll test a couple of other ones that are kind of newer. May work a little better. There've been a lot of good programs past couple of years that have come out. What GIMP basically is it's an open source version of kind of like Photoshop from Adobe. It can do a lot of the same things basically. So in GIMP, I'm just going to open up the file, desktop, web page development, images, Glacier Park 1. Okay. Now I'm going to take this file here and I'm just going to scale it. So to do this in GIMP, you just click on Image and then click Scale Image. And then I'm just gonna set the image size to be 25%. Okay, I'm gonna scale it, and then I'm gonna go ahead and save this as, and I'm gonna say Glacier Park 1 thumb. Okay, .jpg. And it's gonna just set the defaults or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I just want to create a small photo, which I've done, and I'm going to go ahead and close out GIMP. And then I'm going to verify that the file indeed exists and that it is smaller size, which it is. Okay. Right, now here's what I'm going to do. Here's how you do this. I'm just going to go ahead and set up a thumbnail from small pic to large pic. Okay. Just throwing in a description here, so when you look through this code, you'll see what it does. Alright, same kind of thing that we're doing here, where I did the link to Google. Pretty much the same syntax, slight differences. In this case, I'm going to set up an href to images / glacier park 1.jpg. So this is the big image. This is when I click on the small image, I'm going to this big image. I'm going to pull it up. Okay. I'm just going to say Alt Glacier National Park with rainbows. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. href images Glacier National Park 1.jpg. Okay. And I'm going to set up an image tag. Okay. And the source for the image for the link is images Glacier Park 1 thumb.jpg. And then again, I'm going to throw my alt text here. I'm going to throw it on the next line down. There we go. And then close out my link. Alright, now let's go ahead and save file and run it. No, forgot my close quote after the source attribute. Yay! That was kind of dumb on my part. Anyways, yeah, so that's what you have to be careful about when you're coding, to make sure that you have your attributes properly quoted. Very important. Alright, so anyways, down at the bottom here, I have a thumbnail, which is a smaller picture. And then if I go and I click on this thumbnail, it then pops open the big version, which is what I want. Now, one of the reasons why you would use thumbnails is this. If somebody has a slower internet connection, if I try to load up this image, say they just go to your main page and you've got a bunch of images, if you're loading up these huge images, it's going to take a long time for them to download that. But if they just see your main page, like pretending like this page here is our main page, they're just going to load up these small tiny images, and then if they go, oh well, that's an interesting pic, I want to see that, in more detail, then they can click on that image and then it pops up the full-size one. Okay, that's why we do that with thumbnails, and it's very important practice to do that even currently with today, because some images can be pretty large. For example, this image for the thumbnail is probably about 10K in size would be my guess. Yeah, it's 11K, so very small. Now the full-size one is 80K, so it's 8 times larger. Now if I go and I grab a typical picture from a digital camera, you're talking almost half a megabyte, so very big file. When you're loading up dozens of them or hundreds of them or thousands of them, it can take a long time. So we use thumbnails to cut down on that amount of file transfer. Alright, so in this video, I think we're just about done. We're going to, in future weeks, we're going to talk about, manipulating the files, aligning text, wrapping text around images. I mean, all kinds of fancy stuff, but we're not quite there yet. We'll actually get there probably in week 3 or week 4. So we're just going to go ahead and leave this basic images tutorial here, and that should be it for now. The next video in this series we'll be covering some basics on HTML tables, so we'll see you on that video.